I wanted to take a minute today at the beginning of the podcast and say thank you to our sponsor, Huber Engineered Woods. Huber has actually been a sponsor of the podcast since 2020 when we decided to start this little endeavor. Without our sponsors, this content is probably not something that happens. But I think the best part about having Huber as a partner on this is it's an incredibly authentic alignment. Peter, Steve, and I all use Huber Woods. I've been using Advantech Subfloor for coming on probably 21 years now. I've been using Zip System and Zip System with the insulation on the back, the Zip R, since 2013. It's a system that I believe in. That systems approach where things play well together. They have design parameters that allow you to use their system for what you're working on. It works. Their tech support's there. Their knowledge is there. I've never had an issue with their product, and it's a great thing that they've decided to sponsor the podcast. So thank you, Huber Engineered Woods. Welcome to the Unbuild It podcast. I'm Jake Bruton, and today I'm joined by one of my usual co-hosts, Peter Yost.
And Steve's not here. Can we talk about him?
Steve's not here. And we are joined by special guest, Nikki Krueger. Nikki, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And if you know Nikki at all, you can probably guess we're going to talk about Dalmatians and Dalmatian breeding and
okay, I think I can leave the room now.
No, and that was that came out of nowhere. I don't even know if you own a dog even.
Not currently, but I guess I'll be looking into Dalmatians soon.
I hope that Chris listens to this. I hope that Nikki's husband Chris listens to this. No, we're going to talk. We're going to start by talking about, and we're going to jump right in too. None of the usual back and forth because Steve's not here.
Oh, okay.
We're going to talk about indoor air quality, and we're going to talk about that from the standpoint of dehumidification. But the reason that we're going to take that is because of what you do for a living and where you work. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to just introduce yourself. But I'm going to preface this by saying, like, we all know each other. Like, you're not a stranger guest to us. Like, we've known each other for a while, and I'm assuming you and Peter have known each other substantially longer than I've known. Okay, so
whenever I have a humidification question, first person I call is Nikki.
What about your dehumidification questions?
Oh, well, those are just the reverse questions. Okay. So, yes, both for Nikki.
I recently replaced the ERV at my house, and it came with Bluetooth Connect sensors that are also the boost button.
Ooh.
And the manufacturer calls them dehumidistats. And I was just like, look at you guys with your marketing.
Yeah. And I've always called
you know where they come from.
But your spell check does not like that word at all. It does
Instead
not
of a humidistat, which is what I grew up knowing what they were called. They're called a dehumidistat from this particular manufacturer. Yeah. They're from Brown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, and I'm the one that didn't turn my phone on silent. That's hilarious. It's dinging. Okay. So Nikki, you work with Santa Fe.
Santa Fe, yeah.
What is your career with Santa Fe, and how long have you been there?
So I have been there 16 years total, 2 years as consulting and 14 years full time. I started out solely on our ultra air whole house ventilating side for marketing because Santa Fe, which is our standalone crawl space basement, and our whole house were two separate brands at the time. And my background was HVAC, so I worked on the whole house. And then at some point, they said, we want you doing it all, because it's residential. Whether it's below the house, attached to the HVAC, the attic, it's all dehumidification, needs to be dealt with. So I took on all that. And then at a point, I decided that I really liked getting into the building standards and the building code. So I took more of the building science route for a while, became a HERS rater.
Uber dork.
Yes.
Became an Uber dork for a while.
And that's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, was becoming a HERS rater. It is a lot of math, and I'm a communications major. So I have a BA and BS, which is not building science. So I have a PR background, but yeah, and just really, for me, I think with a lot of people, the math makes sense once you apply it to something that you care about and are passionate about. So math has become easier as I can apply it to HVAC, ventilation, dehumidification. And now I'm back in the marketing, business development, kind of everything that I've ever done all into one role right now.
It's really funny that you say the math becomes easier, because I was having a conversation with my wife the other night about how one of our kids is not being super motivated in school right now. And I was talking and saying, like, I guess I wasn't super motivated in school either. And at the same time, when I was flying here to Texas to record this week, I also spent one of the 2-hour flights literally doing pen and paper math about R values and walls, so that I could do some comparative math, like, for fun. Like, can't believe I'm admitting that. and I was super excited to share it with Peter, because I was thinking about something that I was going to have a conversation with Pete about. And I did drawings on the computer to show what I was. And once you can apply it, and once you can understand how it actually works, rather than just like memorization and school type thing, you're 100% correct.
And as part of the context, his wife has a PhD in math education.
Yeah.
So she has schooled me a number of times on my math.
I presented a couple weeks ago in Dallas, and I put up a picture of Peter teaching my 8-year-old daughter something at our dining room table. And then 7 hours later, my wife teaching Peter something at the dining room table. And I was like, if you listen to the podcast, you guys know that I think Peter is one of the smartest people that I know. And I'm going to make a bunch of like my family and my wife jokes during my presentation. But here's my wife teaching Peter something. Clearly, I have great respect for my wife. She's smarter than Peter.
Yeah.
Math is tough. My daughter really struggled with science and math until she turned 18 and moved out and figured out she could brew beer because she couldn't buy it. So math and science became very easy to her.
Genius.
At that point when she figured that out.
So you guys are both involved in moisture management?
That's right.
Okay, so wait, you mentioned in that conversation that you had a background in HVAC before Santa Fe and before. So where was that? I don't know this.
At a competitor.
Okay.
Yep, at a competitor. And it was great because it was all indoor air quality products. So I really learned a lot. I got my NHB green building certification when I was there. And really all these certifications and diving deeper is just so I can understand what builders are facing, what standards they're trying to meet, what boxes it might trying to tick. But if you don't know that about your audience, because when it comes to dehumidification, they're not doing it because someone's telling them they have to. It's typically because they've had a problem and they don't ever want to have that problem again. And construction practices are changing and equipment's changing, and so much is happening in our homes that it's just going down that path.
Well, I had a conversation with a builder here in Texas recently that they project manager, and he said, well, my boss is in his late 60s and we want to use that waterproofing product for showers. And I see you use it. And I said, yeah, we've been using it. This is about the Schluter system. And I said, yeah, we've been using it since 2010 and we've yet to have a problem that we're aware of. And he was like, yeah, and I work for a very forward thinking company and my boss won't even give it a try. And I was like, yeah, because you guys haven't had a problem and you're not looking for a solution yet. So you said like builders are looking for a solution to a problem that they've had. That is like the biggest part of our industry for when it comes to innovation. Well, builders only look for crap. I screwed that up. Now I have to find to keep from screwing that up again. Like I don't want to have to pay that penalty a second time. And that's a real challenge in our industry for some reason that I feel like, I mean, maybe the automotive industry is the same way. Like we got sued and people died. And so therefore we put in seatbelts or airbags or whatever it is. Maybe that is happening in any industry. And we just think of it that way because it's our industry. So let's talk about what the consequence of having high humidity or lack of dehumidification is.
Well, I think
an indoor air quality
the extreme is then I get that call from that builder and says we're in litigation and I need you to help me right now. But I only have the one house. We only have one house that's having a problem.
We build every house exactly the same.
Exactly. We only have the one. But I mean, that is the extreme. But, you get, as soon as you get above 60% relative humidity at around 70 degrees, 75 degrees, it's true. We have to know it's relative to the temperature. But in our homes, as soon as we get above that 60 for extended period, we're going to have evidence, whether that's just them being uncomfortable, and then usually getting up at night and cranking down the thermostat, potential health problems. We have, all the materials in our house could potentially be compromised. So trying to stop the warranty calls is the second. Like, it might not go as far as litigation for a builder, but they start getting warranty calls. Maybe it's the wood flooring, cupping, blistering of paint, evidence of microbial growth. Then we get those calls and, want to prevent those. A lot of times first step is, a vented crawl space, which we gotta be looking at that first is usually what I go down that path. But
and if we make the homes more energy efficient, then the times that the building doesn't need heating or cooling, the shoulder seasons grows. And now we have a need to whole house dehumidify, and it's not connected to heating or cooling. And so that's made a big change in our industry. Is one of the things about making a house more energy efficient is that there are going to be longer periods of time when it's not calling for heating or cooling. But it is calling for something. Most people just don't know what that is. And that's sad.
Well, Nikki and I had a conversation about this morning that it's called heating and air conditioning, not air cooling or not cooling, because the air conditioning part of it is actually removing moisture. And that removing moisture only happens when the system's turned on, when the system's actually calling for removing, cooling and removing moisture. Well, in the shoulder seasons, like you're describing right now, if I were at home, because it's spring, that would be happening at my house. And because we didn't plan for a dehumidifier, I have one of the little standalone box units that I plug in from time to time.
Wow.
When we're having, I know.
Jake's bearing his dehumidification soul.
Yes. And Nikki even said, well, do you not have room to add one? And I literally had to say, I built a 4,300 square foot house and I don't think I have room to add one comfortably. Huh. And that's like the absolute, that's.
And when you say you don't have room, you mean the configuration of your mechanical room doesn't allow it?
My mechanical room is smaller than my children's closets because we have mini splits.
Yeah, decentralized.
And then I have a water heater and an ERV in that closet, and that's it.
Yeah. And it's interesting because your loads are really low in that building.
They are.
So the shoulder seasons are pretty long.
So there are some times where every once in a while I'll kick on the air conditioning when I don't necessarily want to pay to kick it on. I could very easily open the window and take care of things. And so I failed at my own house from that standpoint. Now it's 6 days a year, maybe. Yeah. So it's not a total failure or anything, but it absolutely, for me, I would run a dehumidifier much more of the year if I had one. I would let the temperature in my house be a few degrees warmer. My electric bills would be less throughout the year. I also, whenever my wife sees that it's, if it looks like the RH is getting high, I will definitely kick the temperature up a couple degrees so that it doesn't look like the RH is just as high. Well, but she doesn't know that I'm doing that.
Are you playing math games with your wife?
I absolutely will play psychrometric charts game with my wife because she doesn't know that I do that. I will 100% go, look, the RH went down, and she'll just look at what it says on the thermostat, and she doesn't see that I've kicked the temperature up 2 degrees.
This is, Nikki, just one more example of how Jake thinks that his wife's never going to see a single Unbuild It podcast episode.
Somebody's going to end up showing her this one. And
and I think you need to explain that, though, is, for every degree that you increase the temperature, the RH goes down about 2%. And then vice versa, right? So the colder it gets, the relative humidity goes up, and the warmer it gets, the relative humidity goes down. But your dew point isn't changing. So same amount of moisture in the air. But it is a
failed
math
to
game.
include that part.
He said he's playing psychometric.
I made the comment when we moved in that we wanted the building to operate between 40 and 60%. And there have been a couple of times where she's been like, hey, it's at like 61%. Do we need to be concerned? And when she left the room, I've been like, click, click on the thermostat. And then she'll come back 20 minutes later and she'll be like, oh, it's at 58. We're good. And she thinks that. Yeah. But that's my fault. I didn't educate her on the system.
It's interesting that you say, between 40 and 60, because if you do a manual J, it's very specific to 50% for your AC. So why we don't say 50% instead of giving this range is interesting to me, because the health benefits at 50 have, there's the Sterling health chart that's out there that everybody can find that shows you all the different things that if you keep it, as close to 50 as possible, things aren't growing, viruses, bacteria. Comfort, 50%. And so, that we think that if we get closer to 60, that it's okay. But you will feel such a difference in your house if you actually kept it closer to that 50 most of the time. And you'd probably even be able to, like you said, increase your thermostat 2 to 3 degrees, and you'd be just as comfortable.
So we said this was going to be part of a discussion of indoor air quality, and it's actually indoor environmental quality, right? Because it's not just about the air, but you mentioned comfort, but the other part of this is managing moisture for other reasons like biological growth. So there's two things that are important about delivering quality environments to people regarding topics that they do not understand or have not even thought about, which is the relationship between moisture content of air and microbials, and also moisture content of air and thermal comfort.
And VOCs. Most people don't even put the volatile organic compounds in there, but we know that the higher the relative humidity, the quicker that products off-gas their chemicals.
Oh, that's really interesting.
So formaldehyde is one of those, but it's the whole Chinese drywall that happened down in Florida, where it was off-gassing, causing formicary corrosion on HVAC systems and refrigerator coils. They know that it made it farther north, but they can't find it because the relative humidity for as long a period of time. So it's humid, but just not for as long as period of time to cause it. They, Ken Gehring, who is one of the inventors of these dehumidifiers, was involved in trying to find a solution for some of these homes for the Chinese drywall. And they do know that dehumidification helped, but that doesn't matter to a mother and a father that have young kids in a house, and you've got high chemicals being released that you really don't know potentially what they are and what other kind of damage that they can cause. But high relative humidity is more than just microbial growth. It's all the other chemicals, which people are tending to be more and more sensitive to. And I think it's because our houses are becoming tighter and tighter, and we're spending so much time
more time
in our homes.
So I don't know whether I'm supposed to tread on this topic or not, but I have to ask, which is, I can go to a big box store and I can get it.
No, let's cover that in a different episode. I'm going to cut you off.
You're going to create episode to episode tension.
Yes, I am. I think we need to talk a little bit more about the energy efficiency thing. And I want to talk about the efficiency of equipment on the air conditioning side and how that actually affects your guys' equipment or dehumidifiers in general. Because I feel like this is a question that I get the second I bring up dehumidifiers when I'm presenting, is people are like, well, but you already said air conditioners do that. Can't I just let my air conditioner run longer? Or you're saying I should get a more efficient air conditioner. Why wouldn't I just buy a less efficient air conditioner and pay to run that longer? And it's like, well, I can buy a more efficient air conditioner and my coil won't get as cold because the run cycles are less. And that will create the need for dehumidification or supplemental dehumidification. And I can do those two for less of an investment than I can just run a crappy air conditioner. And during the times of the year where I don't need the air conditioner to run, I can run the dehumidifier. I mean, that's the simplest way to put it, right?
It really is. I mean, if you're chasing energy efficiency, then you're going after these really high SEER air conditioners. And typically, if you get the data, the higher the SEER, the less water they're removing.
Yep.
And that's because they're so energy efficient at getting to that thermostat temperature. So you're most likely you're going to need a dehumidifier. Now, if you go with kind of a lower SEER, it doesn't matter significantly. It probably will get the coils a little colder and, maybe remove a little bit more water. But the reality is it has to be running. That's what everybody is like, oh, you got to right size. If you right size, then you're going to get, you don't need a dehumidifier. Everything works design wise and installed perfect until people move in and they have control of a thermostat that all they know is up and down. I'm uncomfortable up and down. But if you look at kind of how our houses work, peak loads are usually 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So we're getting good dehumidification. But then overnight time, it's not running as much. And then people are uncomfortable and they get up and crank down the thermostat. So you're using the largest system in your house to overcool, potentially making you more uncomfortable. Now we're cold and clammy. Versus using a very energy efficient dehumidifier that is doing nothing but getting to a relative humidity set point. That's its whole goal, is to get to that set point. And I've heard it in the past too, like, dehumidifiers are energy hogs. I grew up in the Midwest. Every basement had, a
standalone. And
it's like a faux wood, kind of, and you turn it past the one and it'd be a solid block of ice. Mm-hmm. Because they just, the cooler temperatures, they weren't efficient at removing that moisture. And the technology is changing.
Well, I know how to solve that. You just take a 150 watt bulb and you shine it on the coils. We did this routinely. We would put more energy into it. It's like Joe Stiebrick's, there's no free thermodynamic lunch. It's the same thing.
Yeah, but you keep on trying to chase. And I've seen all different, people trying to do things. And I'm like, boy, it just be simpler if you just had put in the dehumidifier. And the tighter our homes get, and we bring in mechanical ventilation because we need to for indoor air quality purposes. Mm-hmm. We've got people in there for longer periods that generate moisture. Family of 4 is about 2 pints or pounds, pints a pound the world around, of moisture an hour. So we got to think about the moisture inside that's generated. And a dehumidifier, it's everybody wants to dehumidify, but not use a dehumidifier. And
that's pretty well put. Yeah.
And being in the industry, in the HVAC industry, and I gone to trade shows, and I get HVAC professionals coming in, and it's the same conversations. If you right size, if we do this, and I used to want to argue about it. Now I'm just like, yeah, you should try that. I mean, you should try it. And
I tried it at my house.
Yeah, keep trying, and that's fine. Work. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't, and then you'll realize you need a dehumidifier. But it's the way we've always done it. Is often the conversation we've had, it's always worked. Well, our construction's changing, equipment's changing. We can't do what we've always done and expect to get the same results.
Yeah, and there seems to be a little bit of historical bias that, I need a dehumidifier for my basement or my crawl space because it's really wet down there, but I don't need it for my house, for the rest of my house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so moving people to whole house dehumidification, even though we do everything else at the whole house level, right? It's like, no, we don't need to dehumidify the whole building. We just need to heat it and cool it.
The one thing that maybe we skipped over at the very, very beginning of all this, the 101 of all of this, is the refrigeration cycle that causes the dehumidification. I feel like this is the other question that I get all the time, and I realize we're going backwards, but I feel like we're remiss without saying this. Like, it is we compress the gas into a liquid, and then we release the gas, and it causes a phase change, and it turns, or the liquid, and it causes a phase change back into a gas, and that gas then causes cooling, and that cooling then causes all the coil and the fins in the coil to get really cold. Yeah. And then when it gets really cold, it cools below the dew point. And then because it's below the dew point, just like your can of beer or your can of soda, the moisture collects on it.
Beer can cold.
Yep. And then the moisture that collects on that then condensates out and drips into a tray and can run away.
And basically it is an air conditioner in a box. We're just not having that outdoor unit.
Yep.
And that's, the byproduct of that. We are generating some heat, but our coils are focusing on getting as cold as possible without freezing in order to remove as much water as possible very energy efficiently. Where your AC coils are going to get, if you're lucky, you got them about 49 degrees. But I think the more energy efficient ones even have a little bit higher coil temps. And their whole goal is just to satisfy that temperature. It's not to, and you want to remove as much water as possible by getting to that temperature. But in order to be energy efficient, sometimes you give some of that up.
Are we allowed to talk about the different type of refrigerants, or is that episode number 2?
That's another episode. That's another discussion.
I am just striking out over here.
But you brought up a topic earlier that I thought we might touch on.
I finally have raised the topic that I'm so happy. Why don't you share that with me?
Adding the letter D to the acronym of HVAC.
Yeah, well, I'll let Nikki launch into this because she knows how I feel about it. But is it right to limit us to 4 syllables or 4 characters for
why does ventilation get its own?
Yeah, why does ventilation get its own?
Especially when ventilation has always just been
open a window
or infiltration. I mean, I think that was our bath and our kitchen hoods was kind of the ventilation. But Matt's been using it. HVAC+D, and I do think it needs its own because moisture is one of the number one detriments to our buildings. And so having the D dedicated dehumidifier, maybe it should be
DD,
double D,
D squared.
But it needs to be considered, and homeowners are becoming much more aware of dehumidification as well. But yeah, we need to be able to figure, to explain that hopefully the air conditioning is doing a good job when it's running. But when it's not running and we have these shoulder seasons, or you've got a really tight house and it's not going to run very long, overnight times, that dehumidification is going to make a big difference.
When I was at Building Science Corporation, we tried to do some sort of
humble brag. Go ahead.
I'm pretty sure this works its way into every episode I've watched. It's pretty
my head from falling off my
conversation.
Shoulders because I was going to say that we worked in the South on dehumidification systems, and we did some pretty crazy stuff like taking a portable upright and putting it into an actual closet, and then have that be like a plenum that's part of the house, all to avoid whole house dehumidifiers. And they sort of worked, but they sort of worked the same way that anytime you put an inadequate piece of equipment into trying to deal with it in a whole house.
Yeah. And we see that done still. But now we've got, papers and research out from Florida Solar Energy that anytime that you put the heat from the dehumidifier on that return side of the AC system, that we're reducing the water removal capabilities of the AC because we're heating those coils.
Oh, yeah.
So now we're reducing that. And then when that AC shuts off and the dehumidifier comes on, we're blowing the moisture and evaporating the moisture off of those coils back into the living space. So, you got to try things to figure this out, but that's why we've always recommended tying in the supply of the dehumidifier into the supply of the HVAC system. And more, because I get called in, and one of the questions is, can you put these in retro? I'm like, well, that's pretty much what we've been for 20 some years. I mean, more and more builders are now making them standard. But what we've done is a lot of times what we get is the calls for the supply ducts having condensation issues. And so not saying that it's the way to fix it, because we obviously have infiltration coming from somewhere that's hitting that ductwork. But if we can blow some of that warmer, drier air into that supply ductwork, oftentimes it helps that problem as well.
I think I remember a paper that you shared with me about, and this is another common problem, is that, I don't need a dehumidification system. I have a ERV, and, it takes care of the moisture problem. And you need to set us straight on that.
Yeah. So ERVs,
Maybe.
Maybe. They are a moisture exchange. So if it's humid outside and it's humid inside, when the air, two paths go through that core, it's just how much can one stream take from the other stream. So you can't dial in a specific relative humidity. Will it reduce the moisture load? It should reduce.
As long as there's a difference.
As long as there's the difference.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe, but
not very well, even when it's the maybe.
But
part.
it's not somebody might say, well, I've got a drain on my ERV. Well, then it's probably an HRV because that's when the core freezes in the wintertime. But it will reduce it. And if if you're a customer or if you can afford to have an ERV and a dehumidifier, that's your Cadillac approach. Keep the two, but we have the ventilating dehumidifiers. So you can bring in outdoor, do a site positive pressure, MERV 13 filters. So you're getting really good filtration for the ventilation and the return air in the house. And, kind of two birds, one stone with that.
I never thought of maybe we need to add a HVACDF filtration. That's not a separate. We got a lot more letters we can.
I think
spend.
the F's implied on all these, though.
Well, I think that's part of the problem is the implied part. It needs to be, as Nikki said, dedicated.
Then are we adding an I and a C for installed correctly too?
Ooh.
And an E for engineered?
Yeah.
Well, you're
HVACDFIC and sometimes Y.
We probably could shift those letters around and spell something if we're good
that we can possibly remember.
Yes.
Well, and it is. HVAC professionals really are responsible for a lot. A lot of times people are just like, it's my heating and cooling system. But we want to heat, cool, ventilate, filtration, dehumidify, possibly humidify, depending on, where you're at. And then that all leads to comfort, health, property protection. And we want it done energy efficiently, 24/7, 365. I mean, that's a lot to accomplish. And that's a lot of responsibility for an HVAC contractor to get done right, because people are not tolerant of being uncomfortable in their homes at any period anymore.
So, Nikki, you mentioned that more and more builders are pulling in dehumidification systems. Are you saying that they're installing whole house dehumidification capacity in line with their forced air system?
Yeah, we're seeing more and more that we're not building with vented crawl spaces anymore. So we're closing our crawl spaces. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways that I worked with, I'm going to name drop Dr. Joe Steenbrook now, is
humble brag. Weird flex again.
Getting dehumidifiers into code for conditioning crawl spaces, because before it was just supply or exhaust. When really all you really need to do is control the moisture if you've done a good job of closing up that crawl space. So we got that 2018, didn't get it right. So we went back in 2021, resubmitted, and made it really simple. And we didn't think it was going to pass because it was too simple for code. But it's per manufacturer's instructions, and it actually passed. But so you got to start below the home.
Maybe that's nobody really cares about the HVAC side of what the IRC says.
Well, possibly, but
you guys are the only ones playing in that space.
Trying to, and I'm going to go at it again, because I think the tighter that our homes get, and the more that we think that conditioned air can control a closed crawl space based on our comfort and thermostat in the living space, it's not going to hardly run. I've done a lot of data logging, and it just isn't enough conditioned cool air in a cool space in order to condition it to, and all you really care about is the moisture down there anyways. But you start below, you got to get below, right? And then you do the whole house. Now we're seeing closed attics, conditioned attics. So that's another place. So I do I need 3 dehumidifiers? Maybe. I mean,
says the manufacturer.
And is part of the flexibility of the products you develop the fact that your dehumidifiers can be ducted?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we've got standalone, and then we've got ducted so we invented whole house ventilating dehumidifiers in the mid 90s. And so we've got the dedicated outdoor duct, so you can bring in outdoor air, and then you attach to the HVAC system.
And that's sort of is the merging of Aprilaire and Santa Fe in that sense, that it's combining mechanical ventilation with dehumidification?
Probably not Aprilaire, but Ultra Air.
I caught it too. Oh, I saw it.
Am I doing a building science blush?
Yes.
That's okay. I actually worked for Aprilaire for 7 years, so good company.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the merging was, we had 2 separate websites. We had resources from marketing. We had 2 different sales team, all for dehumidification for residential applications. And really a lot of our products go into light commercial applications as well. If you look at, strip malls and stuff like that, I think we've got some in some yogurt chains and stuff like that, because all the little sprinkles and stuff tend to clump together if you don't have proper moisture control. That's right. Nobody likes
dehumidifiers and sprinklers.
You'd have no idea how interesting the cake baking world is when it comes to humidity.
Now, I have to tell you, I've been watching more and more baking shows with my wife, but that's a different story.
Yeah. Nobody likes clumpy sprinkles. So, but
I think we got our show title. Nobody likes clumpy sprinkles. I think on that note, we just put a nice little bow on it.
Yeah.
There you go.
When it comes to indoor air quality, there are a lot of things that humidity will affect, including baking cakes and yogurt. Yogurt toppings, not just yogurt.
I'm a little hungry now.
Okay. Stay tuned, because I think we're going to ask Nikki to stick around, and at some point we'll have another episode.
I sure hope so, because all mine got delayed to the next one.
I can't wait to hear what those questions are.
Nikki, thank you for sitting in with us today. I'm glad that we caught you. We're recording in Austin, Texas, and Nikki happened to come down today.
Always good to see you, Nikki.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. Until next time, have a good day.